Oftentimes, Mike, we hear head coach Marcus Freeman talk about other members of the staff that may not be familiar to some Irish fans that are a big part of Notre Dame football recruiting. Now, one of the guys I'm going to ask you about is James Laurinaitis. Some people may know him from his days as a great linebacker in college and the National Football League. Marcus Freeman also talks about Chad Bowden. Put it into perspective. These two guys, what do they mean to Notre Dame football recruiting?
I'll start with Laurinaitis, Darren, and he's like him on the recruiting front. He's basically just another assistant coach. Like that's kind of the impact that he's had. I mean, he is just regularly communicating with top linebackers. Darren, this is something that I haven't been told by any sources or anything like this. Is just Mike Singer giving his opinion. Laurinaitis is at Notre Dame to go get another assistant. Like he's here to get another job. He's a graduate assistant right now. It's just going to be a matter of time before he's an assistant coach somewhere, whether that's Notre Dame or some other college. It just seems like he's being groomed for that under Al Golden and Marcus Freeman. Freeman, of course, his old college teammate with the Buckeyes, 20 some odd years ago. So he's you see him on the recruiting front, involved with all these linebackers that they're after, and prospects certainly think highly of him. I don't know if many of them watched him growing up, but they certainly can Google him and see that he was just inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame, I believe it was. So certainly having a strong impact on the recruiting front. Like Jaden Osbury, talked about him a lot. Osbury, a four-star linebacker, with just deep LSU connections, and picked the Irish over the Tigers, and definitely talked about Laurinaitis a good bit in his decision. Chad Bowden's another one who, man, the Notre Dame recruiting operation, the wheels turn on that because of this man. I mean, he's involved in every single recruit. I don't think there's anything that goes on with Notre Dame football recruiting that the guy doesn't know about. High energy, and impactful. Like a lot of recruits, whether they should or not, commit to colleges because of relationships with coaches, Darren. And Chad Bowden's the director of recruiting, but like some players will commit to the Fighting Irish because I want to go, I want to be with Chad Bowden. And of course the other coaches too, but like he's an important part, not only just again, the operation, sending coaches out on the road, building the boards, scouting, like all that kind of stuff, but the actual recruiting of players too, whether that be on the phone, text messages, or when the players are on campus. He is a very important part of the Notre Dame staff.
It sure seems like, Mike, that this whole coaching staff and all the secondary parts work so well together. It feels like this is as smooth of an operation as we have seen at Notre Dame in a few years.
Yeah, I think that's what we always say until it crumbles. I don't know. But from the outside looking in, that's certainly what it seems like. Look, coaches have egos. We all have egos. So when you have a bunch of alpha males in the same rooms, there has to be, some heads butting. But from what I can tell, it's a pretty close knit staff, and it starts at the top when you have Marcus Freeman, who just has that contagious personality. People just want to be around him, and very charismatic. And I think that feeds down to the rest of the staff, and many of those guys have some similar qualities. So I do think they mesh pretty well, Darren. But again, I think we'd be fooling ourselves if we said that those guys don't bump heads, because they're all former former players. Most of them at the college level. And so of course they have their egos, their own egos, and ways they want to do things. But again, from what I can tell, and I've been covering college football recruiting for about a decade, not only covering the Fighting Irish, obviously, and it's about as tight as a staff as I've seen.
Now, Mike, obviously, a kid's not going to pick a school because of a video posted on social media. But in terms of window dressing and just enhancing the whole package, the way that Fighting Irish media has now stepped up to be an important part of recruiting, it may not make a kid go to Notre Dame, but at the same time, it keeps the focus on this Fighting Irish program.
Yeah, like you said, a kid's not going to pick Notre Dame because of some, cool video. But if Notre Dame's not doing that and all the other schools are, it can hurt Notre Dame. Does that make sense? And I think it's another thought on this is under Marcus Freeman, it's kind of this outlook, especially from the national media looking in, being like Notre Dame's kind of cool again. Like I think that's kind of how we all feel like, this isn't your grandpa's Notre Dame kind of thing. Like Notre Dame's not stuffy anymore. Whether they were or not, that's a different discussion. But Marcus Freeman is just making Notre Dame cool again. That's kind of what has been the off season. From the outside looking in on the Fighting Irish and what Notre Dame is doing on social media, I think is a fact. That's a big part of it. And whether it's Notre Dame sending graphics to recruits or the whole Hangover Vegas spoof thing that they did, it was fantastic. Recruits know that. They see it. I asked them about it. They all love it. When you're getting texts daily from Marcus Freeman, then you go see him on, that Hangover spoof, like that means a lot to the players.
We're talking Notre Dame football recruiting with Mike Singer, Notre Dame football recruiting insider, Blue and Gold Illustrated, blueandgold.com. I'm Darren Pritchett. Should we know the name Davis Sherwood?
Yeah, how about this, Darren? In the, what class would he have been? 2021, I want to say. He's just going into his sophomore year. So typically, Darren, you have a walk-on, and they're going to redshirt their first year. Like that's just how it goes. He didn't. He was a key part of the punt team, and played linebacker, not on the field, but helped out in practice and I'm sure scout team and whatnot, and then gets moved this off season to like a fullback type role whenever Notre Dame's going to use one in tight end, and has had a really good fall camp from everything we've been told at Blue and Gold, and then sources told us today that offensive coordinator Tommy Rees informed Sherwood that he'd be on scholarship. So always a neat thing when a walk-on gets put on scholarship. This opened up due to Avery Davis' injury. He was put on a medical, red shirt or medically retired or whatever the correct terminology is there. So Notre Dame was at 85 scholarships. The Davis injury unfortunately opened up this one for Davis Sherwood. But again, it could it be for a more deserving young man to earn this scholarship? And I do think that this sophomore will be able to contribute on the field as well. I do want to mention, and go to blueandgold.com and you'll see the story. Notre Dame football puts walk-on tight end Davis Sherwood on scholarship. He had a bunch of offers, smaller Division I schools coming out of high school, but he battled injury junior, I want to say junior and senior years, dinged up, and just couldn't get the big time looks that, he thought that he should have gotten. So he takes a chance on himself to go to Notre Dame rather than, take a smaller D1 offer, and clearly paid off because going into year 2, put on scholarship. That's pretty impressive for this young man.
Well, high school football got started across the United States last week, including right here in the state of Indiana. So Notre Dame football had some of their commitments making their debuts for 2022. Who stood out last weekend?
Yeah, Darren, it wasn't a ton of Notre Dame guys. I want to say it was about 7. The one who stood out the most was Rico Flores Jr., 6'1", 195 pounds, 4-star receiver commit for Notre Dame, and position coach Chancey Stuckey. Blowout win for them. His stats on the day: 7 receptions for 156 yards and 2 touchdowns. And for YouTube audience, we have the clip of one. It's a deep post where he runs about 20 yards, cuts towards the post. Quarterback lays it on him perfectly, stretches out, makes the catch, and runs into the runs into the end zone. And then Flores even tweeted out himself, "Don't question my speed," because I mean, look, a lot of us talk about Flores. He's not a burner, but he's a technically extremely sound and impressive route runner. But Flores is saying in this tweet, "Hey, don't sleep on my speed. I can run past you too." So, Darren, I feel like us as a community who follows Notre Dame football recruiting, someone will commit and it's a big time get, and then you kind of just forget about it. And as a couple weeks go by, and it's like, yeah, it's a big time get, but yeah, we already got him. We're not too focused on that right now. But let's just remember, like, this recruitment: Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, bunch of schools after Rico Flores. Um, Notre Dame did the best job of recruiting him. Chancey Stuckey, when he came in January, made Flores a huge priority, went after him hard. I think there was some luck for the Irish to get him the way that Georgia and Ohio State started recruiting him in June. But Notre Dame did the best job, went out and landed this top 200 nationally player, and he's definitely going to have a big senior season. I expect other schools to pick up their pursuit of him, especially if they lose a commitment and they're looking at who's still out there that we could go get. I expect programs to come after Rico Flores Jr., so Notre Dame's going to need a fight to hold on to him.
So now let's get to a player that's on the Notre Dame football team right now that you followed in the recruiting process a couple of years ago. And I'd just like for you to, reminisce or talk a little bit about him. But Prince Kollie's been showing up a lot on some blueandgold.com stories of Notre Dame football practices. This is an extremely talented young man coming out of high school. He's a 4-star recruit, a linebacker that I think we all felt like was going to impact this team eventually. Well, it looks like the impact is starting to happen as of right now. What do you recollect about Notre Dame going after Prince Kollie, and who do you feel like he might become here in college?
First of all, Darren, to be honest, I'm not surprised at all. I mean, this is what we expect. I mean, the dude was so impressive. So he was coming out in the 2021 recruiting class, which was heavy. That was the class that could not take official visits. Very impacted by the pandemic that had, an 18-month recruiting dead period. So Kollie could not go visit any of these schools. Like, I want to say the first time that he met the coaching staff was when he enrolled, or maybe he visited for like the spring game, but after he signed, again, if it serves me correctly. So I went out to go see him a couple times, and I mean, the competition level in Northeast Tennessee, where he plays, played Jonesboro, David Crockett. You don't see many guys like Prince Kollie. It's like, holy crap! Like, he looks like a grown man with a bunch of kids. In no disrespect to those other players, they just happen to be standing next to Prince Kollie, who was just a dude as a senior. When I got to see him running the ball, playing linebacker, playing safety, was just so impressive, physically dominant, and look, his junior year, he was more of a safety. He didn't play linebacker until like the last game of his season when they had an injury, and then he's being recruited as a linebacker. So he did play it his senior year, but he was just learning the position. He gets to Notre Dame, and of course, I think he was like physically built ready to play as a true freshman, but needed some time to kind of learn not only the nuance of college football, but the nuance of the linebacker spot. And yeah, so it's no surprise now that, all right, he's kind of getting this game in the linebacker spot, that he's probably going to break into the linebacker rotation just based off his athletic ability alone. 5-star prospect, and On3 had him as the number 25 overall player in his class and the number 4 linebacker. So absolute freak show. Incredible person from a great family. Prince Kollie, someone you just root for, Darren.